Now, the fight for justice for apartheid activist Ahmed Timol continues. Today marks 4 years since the inquest into his death was opened. In 1972, it was ruled that Timol had committed suicide. But years later, in 2017, that was overturned, opening the way for the historic inquest. For more on this, we're joined by son of apartheid activist Steve Biko. Nkosinathi Biko joins us now virtually. Thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. So now, of course, in 2017, that judgment in October of 2017 was very historic for our country. But really, it just means that the families who suffered during those years are only getting a part of the closure that they're looking for, because nobody really goes for prosecution.
Indeed. First, I must start by commending the family of Ahmed Timol. One of the judges, Judge Kashalia, in the recent judgment by the SCA, says that their act is indeed a heroic act. And they have stood behind this matter and have seen it through. There was a stage at which the record of Timol suggested that he committed suicide. And they have moved that process to a point where, for the first time, they have given a voice to hundreds of other comrades who were murdered in detention, whose records reflect the same official account. So it's quite commendable. But of course, yes, there will always be a hollowness to any outcome or quest for justice in respect of murder, because ultimately you are unable to bring back the deceased. But what we are able to do is to ensure that this country places a strong emphasis on the value of life and the value of human dignity, which are regarded by our Constitution as inviolable rights in the Bill of Rights.
Now, of course, there's also the question of political will. I mean, for instance, that apartheid security police officer, Mr. Rodriguez, who was supposed to have started his trial in 2018, that trial has still not begun.
Well, that trial has still not begun because Rodriguez has used every trick in the book to avoid appearing before court to account for his actions. And the irony of it is that he leans heavily on the South African Constitution, which guarantees us our rights as citizens. This is a very constitution he fought to ensure would never see the light of day in this country. And it's a big irony that he then has to use provisions of our Constitution, including the fact that he argues justice delayed is justice denied. We are looking forward to his 19th appearance in court and ensuring that for the first time he accounts for the murder of Ahmed Timol.
Mr. Biko, let's talk a little bit more about the political will to have, prosecutions happening. I mean, I know that in most of these cases where people were deemed to have committed suicide back in those days, and it's found that they weren't, in most cases the perpetrators are probably not alive anymore, etc., and some of them probably very old, just like Mr. Rodriguez. But the political will to give families more closure in terms of what really happened to their loved ones.
Yes, there is a serious lack of political will. And all of these court cases, be it the North Gauteng High Court under Judge Montle, or the case in the South Gauteng High Court or the SCA, all reflect on this issue of a seeming lack of political will. And one of the most profound voices on this is the voice of Advocate Vusi Pikoli, who speaks about not just lack of political will, but political interference. And this is where I believe that the ruling party, the ANC, to the extent that it is the one that informed the posture of the state in respect of these matters, this is where I think there needs to be some serious reflection. I've argued elsewhere that we are reliant, for instance, on the ANC to see us through on doing right by us on the question of the land. But remember that the most prominent right in terms of our constitution is the right to life. And even as the TRC made firm recommendations on what ought to have happened in more than 300 cases, those prosecutions have not happened. And the time for them to happen has come. So it is a matter that the party needs to reflect on, and I believe citizens need to hold the state to account on. We cannot have a transition from the violence of apartheid that we saw to a democracy without re-emphasizing the value of life and human dignity. Otherwise, we run the risk of forever being found wanting in that regard as a democracy.
Judging from what happened in the Timol case, and I know that already with your father, Steve Biko, it was already ruled that he was in fact murdered. We had, I think, 4 police officers who appeared before the Truth and Reconciliation Commission admitting to the fact that your father was killed and didn't in fact commit suicide. But would the family be, are you thinking of reopening that inquest to find out who exactly were the perpetrators or the role players in your father's death?
Yes, so we are aligned with a number of other families under an umbrella called the families of victims of apartheid atrocities. And the posture of the Biko family was that we should shift the focus from the seemingly high or known cases, because we can solve for those, but we then would not be able to do justice to an entire class of people. We ran an exercise many years ago where we researched the number of people who were victims of torture and death in detention. That's but one class. There are others who were assassinated outside and so forth. So we are quite recharged. We have received representatives of the Hawk at the Steve Biko Center. We have built the biggest archives of material by and about Steve Biko and the Black Consciousness Movement. And we were able to show them the vast volumes of evidence that could take us to the next stage in terms of the Biko case. And we are going to, together as a group, press and ensure that the NPA does right by victims of apartheid.